Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of July the 27th and July the 28th, 2024. So we've got the Olympics. Olympics started on Friday night, and I suppose I better talk about them. I must concede, though, I don't find the Olympics particularly interesting. You know, as I've said before, I'm kind of showing my Saturn in Aquarius here a bit, but I don't actually see the point in the Olympics. You know, the Olympics were all about Cold War rivalry. You know, when you saw, the United States, Soviet Union, having these huge rivalries played off in terms of sports, that was what the Olympics were all about. The last proper Olympics were the Montreal Olympics in 1976, and after that, 1984 Olympics got boycotted by one side or the other. So as far as I'm concerned, the Olympics are dead as an interesting spectacle. I suppose you could have had an interesting Olympics now if Russia had been allowed to compete in a full way, not just be a few select Russian athletes allowed to turn up, but if Russia was allowed to fully compete, we might have had some interesting rivalry here. We've got currently America and Russia at war with each other, effectively fighting it out, this proxy war over the Ukraine. That might have been really interesting, but no, so they aren't interesting. Well, they kind of are interesting in a way, in the sense of what they say about French politics. That's interesting. What impact it has on French politics, the fact that you're talking about Macron's ego, and you can imagine how keen Macron must be to have a successful Olympics. And I've just seen that there's been an arson attack. I think this arson attack was a very coordinated arson attack. But took place between, I think, according to The Guardian, took place between 1 and 5:30 in the morning on Friday. So I thought I would look at this arson attack, or certainly I'll go for the start of the attacks, assuming The Guardian is right, at 1 o'clock in the morning. I also want to look at the astrology of the Olympics in general, because, there is interesting stuff going on. There are several significators of arson in the Olympics, actually. But of course, now the arson has actually already started, before the Olympics have started. And there are kind of echoes of the Notre Dame fire here. And it hasn't quite finished. Other things going on, and sort of looking at how the Olympics relate to Macron's chart. So, as a sporting event, the Olympics, I couldn't, it's irrelevant, but we just want to look at the Olympics as a political event, as something which links with what's going on in certainly French politics, the destiny of France, and also I suppose there's an international element to it. But before I turn to the Olympics, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend, and it is the weekend of July the 27th and July the 28th, 2024. So here we go. So there is a picture of Macron, and of course got the Olympic circles, the top of the Eiffel Tower. Now this is the top of a Second World War American poster which was warning people, saying the saboteur's favourite weapon is arson. So the saboteurs are already at work in France. Now, looking at the chart, I should have said that if you happen to enjoy this video, I would be really happy if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed and you enjoy this video, I would be really, really grateful if you were to subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, but it certainly helps my channel. So turning to what's going on this weekend. So this chart is set for Saturday, Sunday. It's midnight on Sunday. It's kind of halfway through the weekend. And so So it's set for Sunday, July the 28th. And you can see that halfway through the weekend we have got the moon at 6 degrees Taurus. And we've actually got a sun-moon square. So by Sunday we've got Sun in Leo, Moon in Taurus. Now the changeover actually happened on Saturday when the moon went into Taurus. So the moon went into Taurus at 6:22 p.m. London time. So that would have been late morning, early afternoon in the Americas. So if you are in the Americas, it's pretty much a moon in Taurus weekend. If you're in Europe, it's sort of moon in Aries up until the evening, and then from Saturday evening onwards, moon goes into Taurus, and obviously it's in Taurus for the rest of Sunday. If you're further east from Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, then you can basically say it's Saturday is moon in Aries, Sunday is moon in Taurus. Now, that is a little bit of a change. You've got the weekend starting off with moon in Aries, wanting things to happen, having a certain sense of the dramatic, and perhaps seeing connections between things and wanting to act quickly. So that might be how the weekend starts. Though we should say that the moon is, the moon in late Aries is, it is void of course, I think. It is void of course, yes. So, when the moon is going through late Aries, it's kind of exciting sign in a way, moon in Aries, but the moon will have made its last major aspect towards a traditional planet before leaving the sign. So the moon will be void on for much of Saturday. So there might be a sense on Saturday of being excited about stuff, thinking that things really can happen, but somehow there's no follow through. And then the moon moves into Taurus, and that is a different picture. The moon moves into Taurus, it starts makes a square to Pluto, makes a trine to Mercury. So there is kind of more action with the moon moving into Taurus. But moon in Taurus is, in a sense, a less exciting sign from Aries. So in a way, moon in Aries is an exciting sign, but with no follow-through, at least this weekend. And moon in Taurus, perhaps a less exciting sign, but at least it's applying to something. Though it's difficult to say which day is more interesting, Saturday or Sunday. I said probably on balance Saturday is a more interesting day than Sunday, but I think it's pretty marginal. Now, there are a couple of other aspects going on. We have got Venus, which is in Leo, is sort of making a quincunx to Saturn. It's not exact, but at the start of the weekend, certainly we got Venus quincunx Saturn. And so with Venus quincunx Saturn, there may be a certain sense that it is difficult to relate in quite the way we'd like. Quincunx is quite a difficult aspect. And, we find, there's our Venus in Leo, wanting attention. And then it's quincunx Saturn. Saturn is not so interested in providing that attention. It is Saturn in Pisces, so it's about perhaps not really getting the emotional atmosphere and just feeling that we're slightly a bit like a fish out of water or a lion out of water, I suppose, for a Leo. But it is Venus in Leo. Well, lion out of water, no, that doesn't work. Lion out of the savannah, I don't know. But anyway, Venus quincunx Saturn. And another aspect is Mercury quincunx Pluto. So Mercury in Virgo, quincunx Pluto in Aquarius. So here is poor Mercury in Virgo, strongly placed, trying to make sense of things. By and large is able to make sense of things, wants everything to be easy, logical, upfront in Virgo. Then it's quincunx Pluto. That means Mercury is just having to deal with stuff which is quite complicated, and it's just doesn't feel right. It's about people talking about stuff we don't want to engage with, maybe, or perhaps having to deal with collective forces which are just getting in our way. And so I don't think that either of those quincunxes is particularly fortunate, though I suppose overall one could say that astrologically, maybe you could argue there isn't actually so much going on today. I mean, it's not a super busy day. In terms of fixed stars, though, we've been talking about Uranus conjunct Algol, Neptune conjunct Skeet. Uranus is actually separating from Algol. I mean, it's still there. It's 13 arc minutes off Algol, but maybe the capacity for disaster is starting to ebb a little. Although Uranus on Algol is not the only way to find disaster. There are other ways of finding it, like Neptune conjunct Skeet. So Neptune has been on Skeet for a long time. Skeet is the planet of shipwrecks. So Neptune conjunct Skeet is particularly disastrous. And Neptune was to an extent moving away from Skeet, but then now it's going retrograde. And right now, as we move into the Paris Olympics, Neptune is conjunct Skeet with an orb of 2 arc minutes. So at the moment, Neptune is really close to Skeet. So any aspect to Neptune over the next few days or even next week, particularly a hard aspect, conjunction, square, opposition, semi-square, sesquiquadrate, any of that series of aspects is likely or could be pretty dramatic. As far as the heliocentric picture is concerned, I'm not saying anything amazing is going on, but I just think just as a matter of form, it's always a good idea to check out the heliocentric view. We have got the Earth is making a trine to Jupiter. So Earth trine Jupiter is perhaps not too bad. Earth trine Jupiter is about being optimistic. This is the Earth. The Earth, the planet on which we live, is trine Jupiter from the Sun's perspective. And so some of us may feel the sort of a protective influence of Jupiter, and at the same time feeling a certain sense of optimism that things actually can work out. And yeah, in parts of the world, there may be a certain sense that things can go right, and we're hoping for the best. But Jupiter can be treacherous. Jupiter is not always a fortunate planet. When you've got Earth trine Jupiter, something happens easily, happens quickly, and it can't be helped. It's just too quickly. So it's the final straw. That can be how Earth trine Jupiter works. And just I was looking, for example, at the horoscope of Warren Harding. So Warren Harding was the US president elected in 1920, and he was a Scorpio, and he had his son, I don't know, about 10 or 11 Scorpio, something like that, and he died in office, and he died on a pretty close sun. I think there was a Sun square Jupiter when he died, and Warren Harding had transiting Jupiter exactly on his Sun when he died. So in astrology, Jupiter is often associated with death, and certainly that's something I've been told. Even when I started learning astrology right from the beginning, the astrology teacher or teachers I had, certainly one teacher was emphasizing the connection between Jupiter and death. Anyway, I'm going off the point here, a bit of a red herring. So, to conclude with this heliocentric picture, yeah, Earth is trine Jupiter, but I don't think, aside from that, there is a great deal happening. So, let me now look at the astrology for the 12 signs for this weekend. So, these are my forecasts for the weekend of July the 27th and 28th, 8th for the 12 signs. Aries. It's a weekend in many respects of two parts. On Saturday, or at least for much of Saturday, you're going to be keen to make things happen. You just may feel you have to make things happen. That there's a certain sense in which if you don't make them happen now, then you might miss your chance. So that is a possibility. And so you might be in a bit of a hurry. And I wouldn't necessarily be in too much of a hurry, because if you haven't done it already, short term, are you going to be able to get it together right now? I mean, that is the question. Well, it is true that the Sun is still making a trine to Mars. And I do think that is very fortunate. It's still there. Now, I've been talking about this Sun trine Mars for the last couple of days. It is starting to separate, but nonetheless, the Sun and Mars are just over half a degree apart in the middle of a weekend. And that, that Mars is Mars in Gemini, sextile the Sun. That is still an energizing influence. So even if you can't get immediate tangible results, you are certainly energetic. And I think that you can do something useful and fun. I think the fun aspect of things is very important. Something where you're just doing it for the sake of it without thinking necessarily about the absolute results. And maybe that is the heart of being an Aries and being a successful Aries. It's about not thinking about the end result. It's about doing something because you enjoy it, doing something spontaneously for the moment. And I think that is something you can do probably all weekend because of this Sun sextile Mars, but I think especially on Saturday. Then as you move into Sunday, I think that things are going to slow down. And I think Aries, as you move into Sunday, you're probably going to become more practical, and you'll realize that there are things you need to think about, and your mind, I think, is going to be on pretty good form, but in quite an organized kind of way. I know that organization is not a key word that one is normally associates with Aries, but still I think this weekend it does matter. I think you are quite an organizing force, certainly on Sunday, and you can get things together, and you'll be able to look at things in a very clear, concise way, and you'll be able to get to the heart of the matter, I think, in quite a sort of an intellectual way. So I do think, Aries, that is very useful. Now, at the same time, many Arians are going to have a great sense of the importance of their own freedom. You are not going to want to be told what to do by anyone this weekend. I mean, that is a normal Aries trait, being independent-minded. But I think that trait is going to be especially strong this weekend, even when the moon goes into Taurus, maybe especially when the moon goes into Taurus, because the moon, yes, it's moving into Taurus, it's moving out of your sign, but at the same time, moon in Taurus in general, it's quite stubborn, and when we link it up with other things going on, we get the idea of Aries being stubborn, wanting to do things its way, and not really being in the mood for listening too hard to what other people want. And I do think, Aries, that you can get your way. And in fact, some Arians may at some stage over the course of a weekend feel a certain sense of relief. There may have been something that was bothering you, something holding you back, something that was concerning you, and then you suddenly realize that it's not such a problem after all. And it may be a particular event which persuades you that this is the case. So, in fact, Aries, you might sort of end the weekend on quite a good note, just a feeling that in one small way, one of your troubles has disappeared. Taurus. The weekend does start a bit slowly. You know, the moon is moving through late Aries. It's getting ready to move into Taurus, but it's not all the way there. And so you might feel that you perhaps want to hold some things back, not reveal your true self. But I think that as the weekend progresses, as the moon moves into Taurus, things will change. Of course, when the moon moves into Taurus, it depends, doesn't it? If you're in the Americas, then the moon will be moving into Taurus late morning, early afternoon. I suppose I make it 1:22 p.m. on Saturday. So for much of a weekend, you've got the moon in Taurus. If you're in the UK or Europe, you might have to wait until the evening, early evening. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, you'll have to wait until Sunday morning, but fairly early on Sunday morning. But overall, you get the picture. The moon is moving into Taurus, and so you start the weekend not really wanting to do much, not wanting to particularly connect with other people, but then there's a change, and you're ready to make things happen. And I think you really are ready to make things happen, because when the moon moves into Taurus, it straight away makes a square aspect to Pluto. And I know that square aspect to Pluto might sound somewhat difficult, but it is very much focused on you and what you want to do. I mean, if we can break down this aspect further, we can say, well, the Sun is opposition Pluto. I mean, that's been going on for some days, almost a week. I mean, it's separating the Sun opposition Pluto, but the moon in Taurus brings it back into focus, because when the moon moves into Taurus, it first makes a square to Pluto, then it makes a square to the Sun. So the moon will be making a T-square. It'll be on the T. Square Pluto, square the Sun. And I think in many cases that's actually going to be quite motivating. You're going to start to see the struggle. You're going to start to see that perhaps you and some other people are different, have different objectives, have different agendas, and it may not be a situation where you can come to any kind of agreement. And particularly as these aspects are in fixed signs. Moon is in Taurus, Pluto is in Aquarius, Sun is in Leo, very fixed. So you are actually going to be very focused on what you want, and you're going to be aware of everything that could stop you getting what you want. And I don't think that you're going to be really in the mood for compromise. Though, on Sunday, you possibly need to be a bit reasonable, especially when dealing, with home and family. Your home and family matter. Family members have their own views, they have their own plans, and you need to listen to them. They might conflict with what you want, and somehow you've got to create a situation where everyone can have their way. I don't think it's a situation where you want to go for half measures. You give up a little bit of what you want, someone else gives up a little bit of what they want. That is not a recipe for harmony. It's about you getting everything you want, but also making sure that someone else gets everything they want. And I don't think that you're going to be weakened by this situation. In fact, you could be strengthened. And I think that perhaps you need to respect your own strength. This weekend you are in a strong position. You are not going to be overwhelmed by whatever's going on, and you will be able to stand up for yourself. And because you can stand up for yourself, because you've got this strength, then I think you can afford to have, maybe a certain sense of noblesse oblige. What does noblesse oblige mean? I suppose I suppose literally it's about if you're a noble, if you're of the nobility, you can afford to be a little bit gracious in terms of people who perhaps have less power than you. And so that's perhaps what it is. You have the power, especially once moon goes into Taurus. So there's actually no need to throw this power around if it's unnecessary. Just accept your strength and perhaps be grateful for it. Gemini. So the moon is in Aries on Saturday, or at least for some of Saturday. It kind of depends on your time zone. And then it moves into Taurus. So when you've got this situation, when you've got the moon starting to move into Taurus, it just may be a time when Geminis don't feel that they want to be out and about in the public eye. It's quite a low profile sign for Geminis. It's perhaps a time to reflect, but you don't have to reflect in a particularly negative way. It's just perhaps a time to hold back a bit. And at the same time, Mercury is in Virgo. Mercury, your ruler, is in Virgo, and actually Mercury in Virgo is making a quincunx aspect to Pluto, and I think something needs to be said about that, because if Mercury is quincunx Pluto, there is you trying to make sense of things, and you're making good progress. Mercury is strongly placed in Virgo, so I hope you're taking advantage of it, and I hope you're using your brain. But with Mercury moving into Virgo, you like things to be organized in a particular way. I mean, I know Geminis like surprises, but maybe right now you're not really in the mood for them. And then with Mercury quincunx Pluto, you suddenly have to take into account something else. Something you hadn't really expected for. Something you hadn't really expected. It's perhaps a new set of facts, a new reality, and it doesn't quite fit. And you could pretend it's going to go away, but it's not going to go away. And I think perhaps what's worrying about it, at least from your perspective, is it kind of impacts your overall philosophy. You've got a philosophy on life. You you've got a view about the way things are going to be working out, and then suddenly something contradicts it. I mean, to give you an example, I'm a Gemini, and if you've been watching this channel, I spend a lot of time talking about politics. Of course, some people think I know nothing about politics, but maybe that's the case. Maybe I don't understand politics, but still I try. Indulge me. But I create in my head these views about the way society is going, short term, long term. I have a view about the way, for example, the way the economy is going. And it's quite a rigid view, to be honest. And then I see something that seems to contradict this view. And, for example, as you know, if you've been listening to these videos, I take a pretty negative view of everything, pretty much. And I take a negative view of where, maybe overall long-term, where the economy is going. But I'm having to take into account this fact that there is, historically, with this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that we had in 2020, that there is an argument, and I'm not saying this is the case. There is an argument, as we're now on the Jupiter-Saturn square, that the economy could be starting to improve in quite a big way, and there is an argument for saying that the economy is going to get better from now on as we move through 2020, the mid 2020s, and actually, this kind of disaster that I've been thinking about, because of this Jupiter-Saturn cycle, may not actually unfold. So you see what I'm saying? I have an idea. You could see this in what's going on in Mercury and Virgo, me being a Gemini. But then there's something else I need to consider, and I don't really want to consider it, because it kind of conflicts with the way I want to see the world. So that could be how things work with this Mercury quincunx Pluto. I mean, I'm sorry if I sound as if I'm projecting my own issues onto you, but I just want to give an example of how Mercury quincunx Pluto might be working. Just having to take into account a view or a philosophy or a set of ideas which are which conflict with what you actually believe or what you're very certain about. So do take that into account. By the way, as far as everything being fine with the economy, I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just saying there is an argument, and that's certainly an argument that I do need to consider. But anyway, Gemini, I think the weekend is going to be okay, provided provided you're aware of alternative viewpoints. And I should also say that there is actually some evidence that many Geminis are actually going to be quite optimistic. Maybe for just no particular reason. There'll just be moments over the weekend, Gemini, where you just feel deep down that everything's fine. Yeah, you have your worries, you have your concerns, every Gemini does, but you feel it's going to be okay. And I think this is going to be important, especially if you're dealing with other people who perhaps have a certain negativity. And if anyone's feeling negative, feeling that things aren't going to work out, it won't take much to cheer them up. So perhaps, Gemini, you can be a force for good in the world this weekend. Cancer. The moon is moving into Taurus, or at least at some stage the moon will move into Taurus. Kind of depends where you are. If you're in the Americas, the moon will move into Taurus late morning, early afternoon. And so on Saturday, that is. If you're in Australia, that movement will take place on Sunday. But, moon moving into Taurus from a Cancerian perspective, is certainly good news. I think that I think it will cheer you up and make you feel more positive about yourself, and that is because one of the reasons for that is because the moon is moon is exalted in Taurus. So moon, your ruler, moving into the sign of its exaltation. That is good news for Cancerians. Now, before moving into Taurus, the moon was in Aries, and I see moon in Aries as being a time when Cancerians need to be seen and heard, as I think I said yesterday. But the moon was right at the end of Aries. So as you go into the weekend, you may feel that, things just aren't happening. By Saturday, you might feel that nothing is applying to anything. And, you may feel that it's just really difficult to make an impact. But you should be patient, because as soon as the moon goes into Taurus, things will change. Because when the moon goes into Taurus, it makes a trine to Mercury, it makes a square to Pluto, square to the Sun. So things will start to happen. And I think the aspect that particularly needs to be focused on is moon trine Mercury. So that moon trine Mercury is going to really help you in terms of understanding what's happening, being able to project yourself. And actually, the sign Cancer is on the midpoint of this trine, because moon is in Taurus, Mercury is in Virgo. So what is the sign in between Taurus and Virgo? Well, of course, the sign in between Taurus and Virgo is, in the middle of it, is Cancer. So you're going to be increasingly confident as the weekend progresses, and you're going to find it, I believe, easier to express yourself, I think. And at the same time, you're going to be sensible. You're going to understand what steps are needed to achieve your goals. And that's not goals it's not just about money, it's also about perhaps your social life. Who do you want to meet? Who do you want to be with? How do you want to enjoy yourself? And all that is possible. And in terms of how you are regarded, you will be, I think, in many cases regarded as being a rock of stability. I mean, rocks are stable, aren't they? That's the way it is. And I think that people are going to trust you. And when people are around you, it just seems that the world slows down, and a lot of the complications in the world start to disappear. So you are certainly a useful person to have around. Though I suppose I need to point out that the moon, as it moves into Taurus, does make a square to Pluto. So that moon square Pluto, there just could be a moment over the weekend where you're getting ready to do something. You're perhaps getting ready to do something that might seem a little brave. You're ready to perhaps interact. But that moon square Pluto, there is that sense of doubt. Is it the right thing to be doing? Are you perhaps making things a little too complicated for yourself? Perhaps you should hold back right now. I think the moon square Pluto is perhaps useful. It's reminding you that nothing is simple. Even, the most trivial communication, the most trivial outing will have certain complications. But I don't believe that these complications are so bad that they should cause you to withdraw or to cancel or anything like that. It's just
it's just actually quite a natural process for Cancerians. Cancer is a sign that is quite security orientated, and so with that moon square Pluto, it'll just that little reminder that you've got to look after yourself. You've got to consider what you're doing, make sure everything is in order. So yeah, in that sense, I think the moon square Pluto could actually be quite useful. And really, that's probably all I've got to say for this weekend. I think in general, this weekend does get better as it goes along. Leo, you do feel that it's a time when you want to be making things happen. You don't want to be left behind. And I think that your ability to interact with people is pretty good all weekend long. And I think your social skills, I would have said, are quite good. You find that it's relatively easy to adjust your approach to fit different people, and that perhaps is something you should perhaps be congratulated for. Leo does have a reputation for being quite fixed, because it is a fixed sign, and if you're too fixed, that can cause issues in terms of how you manage your social life. And I think you seem to understand this, and I think you seem to understand the importance of being flexible, being reasonable, realizing that different people have different personalities and different agendas, and being able to just go with the flow. I think you're making a big effort here, and I think it's starting to pay off. And in terms of what you're trying to achieve this weekend, I mean, it is a weekend of change, because the weekend starts with the moon in Aries. It finishes with the moon in Taurus. I think it starts with moon in Aries. That's you not particularly committed to anything. Perhaps just seeing how things are going, perhaps having an open mind with moon in Aries. But then as the moon moves into Taurus, Saturday, Sunday, depends on your time zone, with the moon moving into Taurus, you do start to become more focused. And what's happening is that the moon, as it moves into Taurus, it makes a square to Pluto, and it makes a square to the sun. And so what this means is that it is a reminder that certainly the sun is in Leo, sun is in your sign, you are really in a position to take advantage of the sun being in Leo. And that's something that really gives you enormous strength. And so we've got the sun in Leo in its own sign, in your sign, and we've got the moon in Taurus. Now the moon is exalted in Taurus, so sun and the moon are both strong, and the moon is in a high profile part of your chart, square the sun. I don't regard that square as being at all unfortunate. So what that moon square sun is it's a, let's get this right, it's a last quarter moon. So there's this last quarter moon this weekend, and that last quarter moon really does impact you. And I think it's like you've reached a stage where you see how everything works, you understand the truth, and you're starting to realize that you maybe haven't got all the time in the world to achieve something, and that's what the last quarter moon is doing. It's giving you a little bit of a hurry, because in a week's time it'll be a new moon, and you might feel that then new lunar cycle. So you better get going while this current lunar cycle is still in existence. But don't worry. I think that you're able to to bring to bear a considerable amount of power. And I think that your strength will be that you are focused. You are really focused by the end of the weekend with this moon square sun. And then you have to consider, what is Pluto's role in the matter? Well, Sun opposition Pluto, that was an aspect you perhaps thought you'd said goodbye to a week ago, almost a week ago, with the Sun in Leo opposition Pluto in Aquarius. But the moon brings it back into focus, and it is about other people. And so we've got this sort of mixed position. On one hand, you're doing very well in terms of understanding other people, being flexible, being actually quite considerate, because you know you have to be considerate. But at the same time, you do have a certain sense that there is a bit of a power struggle going on, that it just may be certain individuals, but it may just feel still a bit of a win-lose situation, and that moon moving into Taurus is just a reminder of that. I do think, if you really do think there are people out there trying to stop you doing what you want to do, I think to some extent it may be a figment of your imagination. The moon squaring Pluto may encourage you to overestimate someone's abilities and skills and power. Whereas if you were realistic, and I think you can be realistic with the moon in Taurus, but if you were realistic, you'd realize that there were actually limits to how much power anyone has, and that all things being equal, if you really had to go one way or another in any conflict, pretty much any conflict, you're the one who has the strength, and you're the one who can eventually win out. But overall, I do think that this last quarter moon is pretty fortunate. It's just because the moon is in its exaltation, the sun is in its own sign, and I think that gives you a lot of focus and also a fair amount of luck. So that should bode well for the beginning of a new week as you move into Monday. Virgo. Mercury is now fairly well established in Virgo. Virgo is, of course, your sign. And so with Mercury moving through Virgo, you do have a pretty good sense of what is going on. And, there's information coming your way, but I think you're going to be able to analyze this information pretty well. And I don't think anyone's going to fool you. And you'll have an amazing ability to focus on the things that matter. And that's what it's all about being a Virgo, isn't it? I mean, there's one of the key words for Virgo. I think when I was learning astrology, you had to, not had to, but it certainly helped to learn what the signs meant. But one of the key words was discrimination. Discrimination, of course, not in the sense of discriminating against people, but making distinctions, understanding what's important, discriminating between the sacred and the profane, discriminating between what is useful and what can be thrown away. And that sense of discrimination is really working well at the moment with this Mercury in Virgo. You understand what matters. If there's a load of information, facts coming your way, supposed facts, you'll be able to pick through it all and decide what matters in most cases. Though, I should point out that Mercury is quincunx Pluto. And this Mercury quincunx Pluto may indicate moments of puzzlement. I don't know I don't really know any Virgos at the moment, but I seem to remember when I did know Virgos that with a Virgo, if you wanted to confuse a Virgo, changing the conversation immediately or changing plans, if you have a sudden change of plan or a sudden change of a topic of conversation, can completely throw a Virgo. Not all Virgos, but some Virgos. Something changes and everything changes. And Virgo doesn't know what to do, and Virgo has moments of confusion. And maybe this is, with this Mercury quincunx Pluto, it's Virgo having to adjust to a change that was not expected. Now, Mercury's quincunx Pluto may be about a change of plan, or a change of an appointment might get cancelled, a plan might get changed, and just something might happen which forces you to reconsider. And I suppose if you're not careful, that could just completely throw you. And it might not just be moments of confusion, it may be hours of confusion. Indeed, in extreme cases, it could wreck your weekend. So, Virgo, if you're in a situation where there is a change of plan, don't panic. Accept it. Accept the situation, and just tell yourself that your brain is working well, you're flexible, you're able to come up with an alternative. You'll be able to do it. Don't worry about it. Don't get annoyed either. Things happen. Even if someone else is being obnoxious and is being inconsiderate, just don't worry. Take it in your stride, and I think you will quite successfully be able to deal with the issue. And I would have said, in general, that the weekend probably gets better as it goes along, because the weekend starts with the moon in Aries, and of course Aries and Virgo are two signs that don't really have a lot to say to each other. They don't have a lot in common. But then the moon moves into Taurus. It might move into Taurus Saturday, late morning on early afternoon if you're in the Americas. Might move into Taurus on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But at some stage, your moon will move into Taurus, and with the moon moving into Taurus, Virgo, you're going to feel a change. And I think that this change will be a change for the better. You'll feel a lot more comfortable. I think you'll be less inclined to worry about things. And at the same time, I think you're going to be more curious. You're going to be sort of interested in what's going on in the world. And there'll be things going on that can perhaps excite you, but they might also reflect on your basic sense of what is true. Because truth matters at the moment, and you want to get evidence that you're on the right path. And I think you will get evidence that you're on the right path, but you may have to make a small change. And that might actually be connected with that Mercury quincunx Pluto. It might also be connected with the fact that when the moon moves into Taurus, it makes a square to Pluto. So in fact, this weekend, you've got moon square Pluto, Mercury quincunx Pluto. So a little adjustment is going to be needed. And in the first instance, that adjustment is something you're not going to want to do. But once you enact this adjustment, you'll realize that it was indeed the right thing to do. And having made that change, you're going to suddenly start to feel really good about yourself. And, by the end of the weekend, I think, Virgo, there will be a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Libra. Okay, the weekend starts off with the moon in Aries. So you could say with the moon in Aries, you just might feel that you do have to take into account what's going on out there, what other people are doing, even perhaps what organizations are doing. You perhaps don't feel completely a sense of agency. And I know that Librans do understand that they're not alone and that the social aspects are important to you, but it can become too much of a good thing, and you might at some stage be yearning to be independent, to be able to take your own decisions. And the moon eventually moves out of Aries and it moves into Taurus. So moon moving into Taurus is a change for Librans. I think that you're going to perhaps be less dependent on other people, possibly more independent-minded. You perhaps realize that you have to do your own thinking. You can't allow other people to do your own thinking, and you have to make your own decisions. And sometimes the decisions you make are not going to be popular, but deep thinking this weekend, and indeed deep feeling, would perhaps be a good idea. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, particularly on the emotional side of things, it is true that emotions are going to be strong this weekend, especially once the moon moves into Taurus. But you have to ask, are these emotions actually going to be positive? Because when the moon moves into Taurus, it makes a square to Pluto. And with moon square Pluto, it just may feel that just things are just a little bit too intense, and that if you get closely involved with people, things could just get too complicated too quickly. And so you might take the view that it's better to just hold back for a bit. And I don't think matters are helped by the fact that Venus, which is of course your ruler, is quincunx Saturn. So Venus and Saturn are 150 degrees apart. So what that Saturn means is that things aren't easy. You might try, for example, to socialize, to talk to people, see what they've got to say. But I think at a certain point, at quite an early point, you're just going to feel resistance. It's like someone is holding something back. They don't want to give it to you. And, the question is, what do you do? Do you ask yourself, well, do you blame yourself? Are you doing something wrong? Or is it someone else doing something wrong? But I don't think it should be a blame game. I think it's just that right now, you and another person may just be on different wavelengths, and just the environment right now isn't conducive to getting really close and to really understanding perhaps what's going on in another person's world, because something is being held back. Though, Libra, I think you are able to take the initiative and you are able to make things happen. I mean, this weekend there is a Sun-Mars sextile. Now, this Sun-Mars sextile has been around for a couple of days and it is getting a little bit weaker, but it's still there. And that Sun-Mars sextile is quite invigorating. I think it's invigorating for everyone, but I think that you're able to pick up on that Sun-Mars sextile and actually use it. So perhaps it's like something that you've got, this ability. You don't have to use it all the time, but if you need something to happen, if it's very important to you for something to happen, then I think you can actually make it happen. you have to get your timing right, but whatever the situation, you can always change it if it is necessary. So I think that Libra, that is quite a good thing. So don't ever think that you don't have any power, because you do have a lot of power, and I think you're going to become more powerful when the moon moves into Taurus. And when the moon moves into Taurus, I think it's not just you're going to become more powerful, but you're going to also become more independent-minded, and you're going to be taking yourself a little more seriously. It is important to take yourself seriously and to decide what things, Libra, are crucial. What things are crucial parts of actually who you are. They can't be compromised. They can't be negotiated. And that's something that you really need to think about. Also, with Moon in Taurus, might be a good idea to pay some attention to the financial aspect of things, but money as in complicated money. The parts of your finances that may be linked with another person, and where you don't have full control, but where you perhaps could have full control if you were to make the effort. So maybe you need to look at the complexity of your financial position and be ready to just ask some deep questions, ask yourself some deep questions, and really try to get to the bottom of things. And it's not just about money. In terms of life's mysteries, things that are concerning you, bothering you, worrying you, even just things that you're curious about, you can really understand things like never before if you make the effort. It's all about being serious, and you mustn't be put off by triviality. So if you take yourself seriously, then the universe will take you seriously in the sense of looking after you. So a serious approach is a fortunate approach for Librans this weekend. Scorpio. The moon is now moving into Taurus, which is your opposite sign. Okay, it may not move into Taurus until Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but at some stage the moon will move into Taurus. So with the moon moving into Taurus, there may be a sense, Scorpio, in which you have to make some effort to consider what's going on in the outside world, outside influences. I know you try very hard to be independent, but none of us are completely independent. Humans are social animals, and so you have to take into account the various dependencies that you find yourself tied up with. So look around you this weekend, ask yourself who is important, which people are important, and how are they important. And if it's a situation where if you sort of ignore other people, you think you can get away without having to worry about their influence, you'd be mistaken. Because, as I said, you are not 100% independent. But this can be a strength and is rather than a weakness. Because this weekend, particularly on Sunday, you are able to understand what makes people tick in that Scorpio way. You don't have to be in conflict with them. You can just be with them. You can look at their body language. You can look at you can consider what they're talking about. You can use you can pick up on your own vibes. You can pick up on all of this, and you can come up with a very good approximation of the other person who you're dealing with, and what their priorities are. And that could be important, because the moon this weekend is making a square to Pluto and a square to the sun. Okay, that's later in the weekend. And the reason that is important is because quite recently there was an opposition between the sun and Pluto. And the sun at the moment is in Leo. Leo is a sign connected with your direction in life. You have a direction in life. It really matters to you, this direction, and you want to follow it. And I think you're quite ambitious about it, but you're also aware of some of the things holding you back. And the moon is a reminder. And your first impulse might be to look at people, including members of your own family, and to just take the view that they are holding you back. They are preventing you from achieving what you want to achieve. Is that really the case? Or are you imagining it? And I think that you perhaps have to consider the things you imagine are holding you back. And you do consider the possibility that you've got it wrong. Also, consider the possibility that what can be an obstacle can be turned into an advantage. So if you feel that there's a person or a situation that is in your way, by looking at the thing again, then you can see everything very differently, and you can turn perhaps a problem into an opportunity. Now, looking at the weekend on a sort of a broader level, I think that this weekend you are going to value your own freedom. Your freedom is going to be really important, and you certainly shouldn't worry too much about other people holding you back. You don't have to get yourself into a fight with anyone. You just have to be yourself, and if you are yourself, and if at the same time you just understand the impact that people have on you, just understand it. People are, people have their own personalities. You have your ties to them. That's the way it is, but it doesn't interfere with your fundamental need for freedom, and you can find your freedom not necessarily by doing anything dramatic. It could just be a change of attitude. You just see the world in a different way, or you just change your eyes, as I think Marcel Proust says. And I tried reading Marcel Proust. I didn't get very far with it, but I do remember his concept that the key thing to change is not about moving to a different country necessarily. It's about changing your eyes. And once you change your eyes, you see things in a completely different way, and you realize that you do have freedom, and freedom it's there, it's with you, and you don't actually have to fight for it. So you don't have to be a freedom fighter, because you got your freedom anyway if you just recognize it. And once you recognize that, Scorpio, I do think that it can be really quite a liberating experience. And it is about liberation, and it might be just through a change of attitude. You just suddenly, your horizons increase. I won't say exponentially, but they increase greatly. So perhaps this weekend, it's just all about your attitude. Get the right attitude, and it could be a wonderful weekend. Sagittarius. The weekend is somewhat changeable, and it doesn't necessarily finish as it starts. So the weekend starts with the moon in Aries, moon in late Aries. So with the moon in late Aries, you're feeling, I think, pretty optimistic. You think that things are working out. Although you may be wondering where it's all going. You're not quite sure where it's going, because you start the weekend thinking there are lots of possibilities, lots of things that can be done. But if you're honest with yourself, though, you may realize that it's not as clear cut as it seems, that possibilities could turn into nothing if nothing is done about them. So there could be a certain sense at the beginning of the weekend, but perhaps everything is applying to nothing, even if you don't realize it at the time. And then the moon moves out of Aries into Taurus. And at first sight, this isn't great, moon moving into Taurus. I mean, you enjoyed the moon being in Aries. Aries is a fire sign. Sagittarius is a fire sign. You felt that, you had space, there was action. Even if you weren't able to see things to their conclusion, you were able to at least express your vision and your creativity. So with the moon moving into Taurus, suddenly things slow down. It's about deceleration. And of course, if you're a Sagittarius, deceleration is probably not something you want, at least to begin with. But deceleration allows you to see things in a different way. Because when things slow down, you have a chance to see what's actually happening. It's no longer a blur. Things are in focus. And when the moon moves into Taurus, it makes a trine to Mercury. And Mercury's in Virgo. Mercury is in a very high profile part of your chart in Virgo, in a part of your chart often connected with ambition and career and status. And so with the moon trine Mercury, you start to see things as they are. Now, in the first instance, there may be a little bit of disappointment, but then you realize that really it's all for the best. You're starting to realize, what was plain fantasy and what perhaps can actually be turned into reality. And I think that this is something you can start to really sort out. And so I'm hoping that by the end of the weekend, you are kind of making yourself useful, tying up loose ends, perhaps turning things which started off as being plain fantasy into something real. And of course, if something is plain fantasy, I suppose it should be abandoned. But some of your fantastic ideas can be refined, and perhaps that's what you perhaps need to do by the end of a weekend. And in general, it's just a time for getting yourself together, and that, of course, will be a good preparation for the new week. And this shouldn't take away from the fact that the Sun is in Leo, Venus is in Leo, and Leo is a nice sign from a Sagittarian view. It's a very optimistic sign. That optimism hasn't gone away. And also, Sagittarius, what hasn't gone away is the sextile between the Sun and Mars. That is very energizing, and you can in many ways count on other people to provide energy and excitement. Though you don't want too much excitement, especially on Sunday, because Sunday is about getting things together. You want things to slow down a little, because once you slow down, you can start. Once things slow down, you can actually start to you can start to organize them. So Sunday is, it's perhaps not a fun day, but I do think that Sunday could be actually quite a useful day. And, whatever it is that you want, I think you can achieve it. Yeah, a little bit of hard work is required, and more importantly, a little bit of thinking. Just be prepared to think. And if you can do some thinking, I don't think that you will be sorry. Capricorn. Things are changing, and I think they are changing in your favour. I do sometimes worry when I do the forecast for Capricorn, particularly recently, because with Capricorn, I've sometimes felt that I've been a little too serious and a little too negative with Capricorn. So, I have to be a bit careful here. But I think that at the moment, Capricorn, things do seem to be things seem to be improving, and I think you benefit from the growing Earth emphasis. It was kind of nice when we had a lot of stuff in Taurus. That was a few months ago when we had Jupiter in Taurus. That was great when Jupiter was in Taurus, but Jupiter's not in Taurus anymore, and now Jupiter's in Gemini. So that's a bit of a downer for Capricorn. But as far as what's happening right now is Mercury is in Virgo. Now, Mercury in Virgo, from a Capricorn view, is really good. I mean, I talked about Mercury in Virgo at length yesterday when I was suggesting to you that maybe you want to embark in some form of education, short-term education. There are things you need to know about, or you should perhaps know about. And now, over the next couple of months, you've got a great opportunity to fill in some of your gaps, some of the gaps in your knowledge. We all have gaps in our knowledge. And certainly Geminis have gaps in their knowledge, and Capricorns have gaps in their knowledge as well. So some of those gaps can be filled in, and I think that would be something very, very good, something very fortunate, something that you should be doing. And at the same time, over the weekend, the moon moves into Taurus. And moon moving into Taurus, that's great from a Capricorn perspective, because Taurus is an earth sign. And so you've got moon in Taurus trine Mercury in Virgo. So moon trine Mercury, it may well relate to knowledge, but it also relates to what you can do, and just having a total awareness of what you can do. An awareness of almost what you're on this earth for, almost. I mean, the moon from a sort of a house point of view is in the fifth house from sign, because Taurus is the fifth house from Capricorn, and the fifth house is connected with creativity. That's true, but in Vedic astrology, and I kind of shouldn't really be mixing my systems, but in Vedic astrology, the fifth house is connected with Purva Punya, which is past life credit. And so with moon moving into Taurus, you could say, well, you're getting a sense of perhaps what you are supposed to be doing, this credit from the past, things that you've picked up along the way. Maybe just in this incarnation, maybe in previous incarnations, but all the stuff you've picked up on the way is now clear. It's now with you. You've got it all, and on Sunday you just might get some insights, and it's not just Sunday, Monday. You get some insights about what it's all about, and you will be helped by the fact that the moon is trine Mercury. Mercury gives you knowledge, it gives you insights, and it also gives you a little bit of ability to do some self-criticism. So if you are lacking in any way, you might be 90% of a way there, 95% of a way there, but you can see the missing 5%. And so because you can see the missing 5%, you'll know what needs to be done to make the thing whole, to sort of complete your knowledge about the matter. And that goes back to what I was saying about the importance, perhaps, and over the next couple of months of education. And that doesn't mean necessarily doing any formal courses, but it's just informing yourself about the key subjects. It could just be reading, watching something on YouTube, but just having some kind of rigor. It's not just idle curiosity here. It's just having a rigor to your endeavours, and I think that is really something you can do. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, I have to point out that there is a quincunx aspect between Venus and Saturn. Now, this quincunx aspect is going to be strongest at the beginning of a weekend, and I don't want to completely overemphasize it, but this quincunx aspect might mean that you don't fully respect another person's sensibilities. It just there may be someone around you who's, they're trying to be themselves. They have their own pride, and their own pride might not be immediately obvious, but there's just something about the way you respond to them which this other person could find upsetting. Maybe you don't take them seriously enough. Maybe you don't give them enough praise. Maybe you ignore certain things about their past achievements or something like that. So this weekend, again, particularly at the beginning of a weekend, if you are engaging with people, if you are talking to people, and you get any sense in which that they are fragile, in which they need some boosts, maybe some ego boosts, a little bit of compliments or whatever, if you get any sense of that, make sure that you do it, because it would be so easy to just not take someone seriously enough, and just by ignoring them or not being sufficiently effusive in your praise, you could upset them. So do moderate that, and just be careful that you give people the support that I think that they really want and what they need. And if you can do that, if you can actually make a conscious effort to do that and to be aware of your impact on other people, then I think maybe you can really start to transform the situation. And in fact, if you make the effort, you can actually turn it completely round, and you can actually be very encouraging. And your encouragement and your focus on the connections between people. In fact, that's what you should be doing this weekend, Capricorn. Try to focus on how people are similar rather than how people are different. And by constantly focusing on similarities, what allows people to come together, what allows unions to come together, by focusing on that, then I think you could be, in your own way, really transforming your immediate world, and also I think creating a world which is a lot happier than it has been in the past. So Capricorn, I think it's going to be a good weekend. Just make sure that you treat other people nicely, and they really will appreciate it. Aquarius. Now, I do read the comments on this channel, and it has been pointed out that recently I've been a little bit negative on Aquarians, so that's perhaps something I just want to address to begin with. Now, there's absolutely no reason for Aquarians to feel negative, really, not at the moment. I mean, okay, I do my signs, my forecast one day at a time, but what is the big picture for Aquarius? The big picture for Aquarius is that Jupiter is in Gemini, and indeed Pluto is in Aquarius. Now Jupiter in Gemini for Aquarians is good news. Jupiter went into Gemini at the end of May, and it stays in Gemini for a year. So until the early summer of next year, Jupiter will be in Gemini. So that is, I would have said, pretty fortunate, and it allows Aquarians to be creative, to have a great sense of themselves, and this is going to be helped by the fact that Pluto is moving in early Aquarius. Now, it's true, very briefly this autumn, Pluto will move out of Aquarius, go into Capricorn, but then it will go back into Aquarius, and it will stay in Aquarius until the mid-2030s. So is that right? Mid-20? Oh, I don't know. When does? Sorry, let me clarify this. Let me tell you when Pluto leaves Aquarius. Pluto is, in fact, Pluto stays in Aquarius. Pluto stays into Aquarius until not the 2030s, the 2040s. So yeah, that's ages. Pluto is in Aquarius until the 2040s. So that is great. I think Pluto in Aquarius means that Aquarians can benefit from a transformative energy of Pluto. They can really benefit from it, and you don't have to be content with the way things are. And so with Jupiter in Gemini and until early summer of next year, and with Pluto on and off in Aquarius, this is overall a time when Aquarians are actually in quite a strong position. And not just a strong position, but they're in a position where they can be very fulfilled. And that's what matters. They can be creatively fulfilled. And if they're not happy with the way things have been in the past, then as Pluto moves into Aquarius, they can create some kind of a transformation. And so overall, Aquarius, from a mid to long term point of view, I think that things are looking really good. Now, one thing going on with Aquarians short term is there has been a lot of activity in Leo, and for some Aquarians that might have been a bit problematic because Aquarius is quite an independent minded sign, and so the opposite sign for Aquarius is the sun in Leo. The opposite sign of Aquarius is Leo, and so when you've got planets in Leo, you do have to consider the other, and that's something that Aquarians don't always want to do, and so that could be a bit of an issue. But it is something temporary, and but it also is a reminder that you can benefit from other people who may be short term in more strongly placed than you. So it's not so bad having these planets in Leo. So I don't think that there's any reason for Aquarians to feel concerned about what is going on. In fact, there's a grand trine in air signs. The South Node is in Libra, Jupiter is in Gemini, Pluto is in Aquarius. So overall, there are a lot of things going on for Aquarius, and Aquarians don't have to be satisfied with the way things are. They can create change. They can perhaps create considerable change with Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto, as I said, being in Aquarius until the 2040s. So that is that's the broad picture. Now, as far as what's going on today, Aquarius, or this weekend rather, the moon is moving from Aries to Taurus, and the moon when it moves into Taurus, it makes a trine to Mercury. And that's possibly the most important aspect today. This weekend, Moon trine Mercury. Moon trine Mercury. It's in a way it's quite a serious aspect. Because the moon is in Taurus, that is about stability. Aquarians, I think, this weekend should be trying to give themselves stability. There have been a lot of things going on, and you may have felt that at times you weren't in full control, but now you can ground yourself, and you can use this grounding as a way of dealing with perhaps recent conflicts, because a week ago, 5 days ago, there was this opposition between the Sun and Pluto, which may have been a bit difficult for some Aquarians, because the Sun, it was in Leo, and Sun in Leo is very strong, and Sun in Leo might have represented a person who was perhaps stronger than you, who had more power than you. Now, that situation, that Sun opposition Pluto, is weakening, but still the Moon this weekend is square Pluto, is square the Sun, and that brings the whole thing back into focus. And perhaps, Aquarius, what you realize is that if you want to be powerful, the first thing you need to do, Moon in Taurus, is to ground yourself. And perhaps that means just staying in one place. And then the Moon makes this trine to Mercury. So Moon trine Mercury is about deep thinking. It's also about deep communicating. So the Moon and Mercury are the two communication planets. Moon is more about sort of emotional communication. Mercury is more about sort of intellectual, mental communication. So when the Moon and Mercury are in trine, it means that when you talk to people, you're able to be very serious. And I think you should be very serious. It's not a time for just idle chat on Sunday. If you're going to talk to someone, make sure it's serious. Make sure you're dealing with substantive issues, because I think there are substantive issues that you do want to talk about, because understanding is important. Though even if you're not talking to anyone, or you're not, indeed, if you're maybe Moon trine Mercury can be about writing emails, text messages, but it's nothing trivial about it. I think you want to make your feelings clear. I think that's going to be important, and I think that is something you can do on Sunday. And with Moon trine Mercury, I think at the same time your brain is going to be on pretty good form, and you'll be able to really get to the bottom of life's mysteries. So overall, Aquarius, I think it can be a good weekend, but I think it should ideally be a serious weekend. Pisces, you are feeling a certain sense of change, because the Moon is moving from Aries to Taurus. And so when the Moon was in Aries, and of course at the beginning of a weekend the Moon is in Aries, and so the Moon in Aries, there might have been certain practical issues that you needed to consider. Could have been practical financial issues that maybe needed to be worked through. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think that you've reached the right level of understanding. And having sorted out practical matters, then with the Moon moving into Taurus, I think that you can start to be more engaging. Yeah, engagement does matter. You perhaps need to tell people what's on your mind and try to work out actually what's on their mind. And I think that you'll come to some quite useful conclusions. And you will be helped by the fact that the moon is making a trine to Mercury. Now, I mentioned the fact that Mercury has moved into Virgo. Virgo is your opposite sign. So with Mercury in Virgo, you're perhaps dealing with clever people. There are people who really know what they're doing, and you can benefit from them. Okay, in certain cases, Mercury in Virgo might represent someone who talks too much and who is quite manipulative mentally. That is possible. But I do think that with Moon trine Mercury, it's about forming really good connections with another person, maybe a group of people, and these connections are strengthened by both emotional and mental communication. Communication is working on both levels. There's perhaps the verbal communication, the mental communication, and there is also the emotional communication. So the heart and the mind are very much working in tandem, and I do think that this is really positive. And as far as you're concerned, I think that you're going to find it all somewhat exciting, even though Moon in Taurus doesn't have a reputation for being particularly exciting. Right now, Pisceans are just aware that they are on the cusp of some kind of change. There is a sense of excitement to Pisceans. They can feel that the world around them is not going to be like this forever. That at some stage it's going to transform itself into something else. And this knowledge that change is in the offing, I suppose it could be disturbing, because none of us like change. On the other hand, I think you're aware that certain things are becoming a little bit stagnant, and that the only cure for stagnation is transformation, and this transformation doesn't happen slowly. It often happens in an instant, and perhaps that's something you need to be ready for, or perhaps it's something that you can yourself bring into action. It may be that you are capable of transforming everything in an instant, and that would, of course, especially relate to, I suppose, your immediate environment, whatever you have control over. Where is the extent of your kingdom? So in your kingdom, you're in a process where you're understanding what is stagnant, what needs to be changed, and you're increasingly in a position where you really can start to make things happen. And that's it for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. Sorry, I want to look at the weekend from a perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 13, with others. So just a reminder that in the Wilhelm translation, this is translated as fellowship with men, but the Greg Wincook translation has with others, and I kind of think with others is more appropriate and, of course, more gender neutral than fellowship with men. And with others, this hexagram is indicating that our social relationships are important over the course of the weekend, that they are going to matter, and we need to consider how we deal with other people, and also the fact that we're not going to be able to achieve very much if we do everything on our own. On our own, there simply are going to be limits to what can be done. Now, this hexagram has 2 moving lines, and we've got the second line from the bottom moving and the 4th line from the bottom. So with the second line from the bottom moving, there is a warning here that there's a lot of factions. People are not really comfortable with each other, and there's a sense in which there's something of a power struggle going on. And this is maybe a reminder about what's going on astrologically. We've got an opposition between the Sun and Pluto. Now, that opposition was 5 days ago, 6 days ago. It was a long time ago, nearly a week ago. But what's happening this weekend is that the moon is moving into Taurus. So the moon is making a square to the Sun, and first makes a square to Pluto, then it makes a square to the Sun. So you've got this T square with Sun opposition Pluto with moon on the T. And maybe the I Ching is reflecting this. Now, the I Ching and the astrology, they are 2 independent oracles, if you like. I don't think astrology is strictly speaking an oracle, but they are independent of one another. But the I Ching is perhaps reflecting what is going on in the sky, and it is saying that there's going to be a lot of factionalism to begin with. People are going to be very concerned with having enough power, and when people are under pressure because things are not going their way, then they start fighting with each other. And very often groups who are unsuccessful, groups who feel frustrated, that's when people turn on each other. And when things are going well, no one turns on each other. But this factionalism is rife at the moment, and it could be quite self-destructive. So if you're involved in any groups of people, in the first instance, don't expect everything to run smoothly. And some people might be behaving in a way that is just completely irrational. They're irrational, really, because they're obsessed with power and they want to be have the power. And perhaps people become even crazier when they realize they're losing power, when things aren't going their way. So that is one possibility, and that's how it starts. Then the 4th line moves. Now, the 4th line in the I Ching tends not to be too bad, and it's talking about a situation where people are lacking strength, and they're lacking strength in a way that may actually be quite fortunate, because they don't have the strength to fight. So you might have you might have a conflict situation today or this weekend. You have a conflict situation and it seems as if it's going to intensify, but people are just exhausted. People are just not really ready to go for a big confrontation, and maybe that's just a good thing. So in terms of what do you do? Well, the main thing is not to be drawn in. I mean, other people are important. If you want to, if you like, cross the great water, as the I Ching would put it, then you can't do it on your own. You're going to need other people's help. But at the moment, other people don't seem to be very comfortable with each other. There's a lot of rivalry and factionalism. So one wonders whether one is actually going to be able to actually achieve anything. I started this hexagram saying, well, you need other people in order to achieve anything. But right now, the people around you aren't in good shape. So if things don't work this weekend, then that just might be that there just simply is a lack of cooperation, unity and understanding. So maybe I have to go and contradict myself, saying, actually, because people aren't very comfortable with each other, maybe you're not going to be able to achieve anything with people, and maybe you should try to achieve things on your own, but then you can't achieve anything on your own. So it's a bit of a difficult situation there, isn't it? So perhaps it's just a question of curbing your expectations. Now, this hexagram does move, and it moves to hexagram number 9, which is the taming power of the small. So taming power of the small, it talks about, dense clouds, no rain. That's what the I Ching likes to say, something like that. And we just have to accept that we're not going to achieve very much. We have to be quite limited in our ambitions. And, maybe we should be focusing on ourselves, and it's almost saying that we should allow ourselves to be tamed. Now, being tamed is not the same as submitting to something. It's just, we have these impulses. There are things we'd like to do. There are things we want to do, but we've got to be reasonable. Hence the taming power. And that may be about looking at what we're good at, looking at what we'd like to achieve, and perhaps working it through. Perhaps it needs to be distilled and refined, and we need a lot of self-discipline here. And we just need to accept that it's just not the time for action. So if there's been any action that you've been contemplating over the weekend, it seems that for one reason or another, it's going to be difficult and probably impossible to actually go through with it. And I think that the biggest problem is going to be the social environment and the assistance you get. If you were expecting cooperation from others, that cooperation might be lacking. But just remember, this is a reading just for one weekend, and on Monday things will be completely different. So that's the I Ching, and I now want to turn my attention to France. So, when I do these videos, the first thing I do, the thing I do just before recording is I just look at the news to see if anything's happening. And I was going to talk about France anyway, but then I've discovered that there was an arson attack, and I didn't have the time to really look at the details of this arson attack, so I might have got a few things wrong here. But this arson attack involved the French railway systems, and I think that there were various lines going into Paris, I think, and there are attacks on 5 lines, and I think in 4 of the 5 cases these attacks were successful. I don't think anyone was killed or anything. It's just that the French railway system was kind of brought to a halt. But as I said, I haven't really looked at the details of it, so I'm really just going to look at the astrology of the thing. But this is clearly a bad start in terms of the Olympics. So I read in The Guardian that the attack happened, the arson attack was between 1 o'clock and 5:30 in the morning on Friday. So this is a chart for 1 o'clock. I'm not saying that in itself that this chart is especially dramatic, although I think this is a reminder of what I was saying with the Sun-Mars sextile. If you've been listening to me talking about the Sun sextile Mars, Sun sextile Mars is a nice aspect. It's a sextile, but it does involve Sun and Mars. Sun and Mars are quite fiery planets. They can indicate accidents, even though it's a sextile. And with this Sun-Mars sextile, you could say, look at it from the point of view of the attacker. Someone has got this big idea to disable the French railway systems, and they start their attack at 1 a.m. Well, they're doing it with Sun sextile Mars. That's quite a fortunate aspect on which to start this attack. And you've got the moon in Aries. Moon in Aries conjunct the North Node. That's very active. And the moon is just separating from a trine of the sun. And then it will go on to make a sextile to Jupiter. So you can look at it from a perspective of the attacker. It may just be that from their perspective, they would see this as being very successful. And the chart does fit with the concept of a successful arson attack. So that's one way of looking at the chart. Now, what I think might also be a good idea is to consider this chart from the perspective of midpoints. So turning to this chart from a midpoint view, so here is a midpoint. Remember, this is a 90 degree dial. Basically, conjunctions in this chart. A conjunction in this chart represents oppositions, squares, and of course conjunctions as well. And an opposition in this chart represents a semi-square and a sesquiquadrate. And what I wanted to do was look at this chart from a perspective of well, firstly, there's Mars. So there's Mars, and I mean, this was about Mars. This was an attack. So what midpoints is Mars on? So Mars is on the Venus-Saturn midpoint, and Mars is also on the Sun-Moon midpoint. So Mars on the Sun-Moon midpoint, that's just telling us that Mars is emphasized at that time. It's a Mars event. And we've also got this other midpoint, Venus-Saturn. So you could say Mars on a Venus-Saturn midpoint. You know, Venus might be having fun, the Olympics, people being excited about the Olympics. It's a fun thing to have, the Olympics. And then Venus-Saturn is about disappointment, annoyance. Mars on the Venus-Saturn midpoint. And yeah, Mars on the Sun-Moon midpoint. And so also, assuming that the first attack really happened at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I set for Paris, that would mean that the Mars was semi-square or sesquiquadrate. The Mars would be semi-square. There's Mars and there's the midheaven. You can see Mars is sesquiquadrate the midheaven. So maybe the attack happened slightly before 1 o'clock, but Mars was not just on the Sun-Moon midpoint, it was hitting the midheaven as well. So I'm not saying that this chart is in itself super dramatic, but I think it does describe what happened. Then there's a question of how does this arson attack relate to France itself? I think it's a real pain and embarrassment for the French. But you can imagine what Mitterrand's feeling. I mean, it's not Mitterrand. I mean, the other one, Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron. You can imagine what Emmanuel Macron's feeling. He is going to be really annoyed. You know, this is all about him, isn't it? As I'll be demonstrating very soon. So, turning to the arson chart and how it relates to another chart. So here is the chart. Here is one of the charts for the Fifth Republic. So the Fifth Republic. This is the Nick Campion chart for Fifth Republic. I think this is a chart that is in his book of World Horoscopes. He's gone for October the 6th, and I know that in France, most people like to regard October the 4th as a celebration of the Fifth Republic. There is another date, I think September the 28th. But it's just interesting to compare the Fifth Republic chart, and even if you take October the 4th, the key planets are not going to be that different between October the 4th and October the 4th and October the 6th, as I'll just show you right now. So you put the Fifth Republic in the middle, and you put the positions of the planets at the time of the attack on the outer wheel, and you see that Mars is at 3 degrees 31 Gemini. So in other words, the Fifth Republic has just had its Mars return. So Mars return, you'd expect that kind of thing to happen, wouldn't you, during a Mars return, the attack on its energy infrastructure. So Mars was also on the Sun-Moon midpoint, so perhaps you could say that the transiting Mars on the Sun-Moon midpoint was hitting the Fifth Republic's Mars. So that, I think, that I would have said fits really well. Now, just a reminder about why Mars returns are important from the perspective of the Fifth Republic. Have a look at, well, not necessarily the Fifth Republic, but also we've got another chart, the fall of the Bastille. So if you look at the fall of the Bastille chart, there you've got Mars on. There you've got Mars at 8 Gemini, and so if you compare the fall of the Bastille chart, 8 Gemini. So we had Mars at 2 Gemini when the rail systems got attacked. So that sort of fits. Mars is still approaching the Mars return. Whether you look at the Fifth Republic chart or the fall of the Bastille chart, you've got a Mars return issue. And just a reminder that when you had the Notre Dame fire, Mars was at 10 Gemini. So the Bastille chart, its Mars return coincided with the Notre Dame fire in 2019, I think on April the 15th, 2019. So there is this connection with arson that does keep coming up. And I think that Mars in Gemini for France is really quite a dangerous time. And we've already had a Mars. Just as Mars goes into Gemini, we have this arson attack. Now, turning to the Olympics. I have looked at the Olympics before, but it is the Olympics. The Olympics are starting, so I thought, well, let's have a look at them again. I mean, they are now totally relevant. So this is a chart for the Olympics, and okay, we are seeing symbolism work in different ways. Sun sextile Mars, you've got the symbolism there of a fire, arson. That's one way of looking at Sun sextile Mars, because it's two very fiery planets in sextile. But Sun sextile Mars can also be about a sporting event. So if you're starting a sporting event with Sun sextile Mars, you could say that's good. Remember, Victoria Beckham has in her chart Sun sextile Mars. I think quite a close Sun sextile Mars. She's got Sun in Aries, sextile Mars in Gemini. And of course, these are male planets. And so it's not surprising that Victoria Beckham married a celebrated sportsman in the form of David Beckham. So that is fortunate for a sporting event to have Sun sextile Mars. And that certainly is one good thing about the chart. Yet, there are a couple of problems here. Well, there's one problem in particular. It's this ascendant. This ascendant at 2958. If it starts at 7:30, it's just on the verge of it going into Capricorn. And we've got Neptune square the ascendant. Neptune is exactly square the ascendant. So with Neptune square the ascendant, we can expect things to go wrong. We've already had an arson attack, which has kind of derailed the thing to an extent, hasn't it? So this arson attack has not helped. And this is maybe the start of Neptune square the ascendant. Things are not really particularly clear and particularly certain. I mean, I suppose with Neptune square, I suppose sporting events connected with the water may be problematic, but there is an air of confusion here. And what is an extra problem with this is the association with Emmanuel Macron's chart. So here is Emmanuel Macron's chart. So you can see that Emmanuel Macron has Sun-Mercury conjunction at 29 Sagittarius, and Neptune is, of course, square his Sun-Mercury conjunction at 29 degrees Sagittarius. And so if we put these charts together, so if we put Emmanuel Macron's chart in the middle, we can see that there's the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics, 29 degrees Sagittarius ascendant, right on Emmanuel Macron's Sun-Mercury conjunction. So transiting Neptune is square the ascendant in the Paris Olympics, conjunct Skeet, remember, and transiting Neptune is also square Macron's Sun-Mercury conjunction. So that is not great. So it's almost like the Paris Olympics is so wound up with the fate of Emmanuel Macron. Now, in terms of the Mars, which I've just been talking about, it might be a good idea to consider, when is that Mars return? When does Mars return to where it was at the time of the fall of the Bastille? So here is the fall of the Bastille, and you can see that the fall of the Bastille, Mars was at 821 Gemini, and so the chart for the timing of the Mars return of the fall of the Bastille is on August the 2nd. So this Mars does seem to be connected with arson already, with Mars moving into Gemini. It seems unfortunate that the Olympics is happening with Mars in Gemini, and because Mars is in Gemini in the charts of the fall of the Bastille and also in the chart of the Fifth Republic. So that seems to be a little careless to have had the Olympics at this time. So if we have the exact time of the fall of the Bastille, if we got that exact time right, Mars is not the Mars return. There's the Mars return, and it is square the midheaven. So I do think that does suggest that there could be a bit of a problem here. So overall, I think that these Olympics don't look great, and I think, in summary, I think that we should be particularly concerned about just the link up between the Olympics and the fall of the Bastille chart. So just a reminder that at the time of the fall of the Olympics, at the time of the Paris Olympics, that the moon, it's a lunar return. Just to go over that again, it's a lunar return because there's a moon within Aries at the time of the fall of the Bastille. Beginning of the open ceremony, moon is conjunct the moon. We've got, as we've already discussed, we've got Mars return. So that, to my mind, looks problematic, and the fact that the Sun at the time of the Paris Olympics is conjunct France's Uranus, the fall of the Bastille Uranus, and this is all looking difficult. And as we also know, if we go to the lunar return chart if we go to the lunar return, then this is kind of emphasized one more time. Lunar return. That's Macron's lunar return. But if we go to the Bastille's lunar return, Uranus on for July the 6th, 2024. Remember, the lunar return of the Bastille is just a couple of hours before the opening ceremony, and then in that lunar return, you got Uranus on the descendant,
Saturn on the IC, Uranus does look a bit explosive there. So overall, I'm not optimistic about these Olympics, though we should also remember that, we have big events. I'm sure French security is going to be in overdrive. And, when we have these big events, astrologers get excited about it and maybe nothing will happen. But already something has happened. We've had this arson attack on the French railway system, which is not a good omen, really, is it? Okay, that's all I'm going to say about the Paris Olympics. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again very soon.